everyone, welcome to History and Stories. Karen Cecilia here. I hope you're enjoying the stories so far. In today's episode, I'm going to talk to you about the one woman that changed how policing and investigations were done regarding to rape, and how she changed the whole psychology of how the world approaches rape and rape victims. In this episode also, I'm going to share with you short versions, not elongated versions, but short versions of just some women who actually did some great things that help women in this 21st century to be able to stand up for ourselves in many, many quarters of the world, even though there are still some spaces in the world where women are still not able to stand up for themselves. So here goes. In the 1970s, when women reported rape to police, they were treated as victims. Women were not treated as victims. They were treated as the perpetrators and interrogated as suspects. They would be asked questions like, what were you wearing? Had you been drinking? Why were you walking alone? Did you fight back? Yeah, had you been intimate with him before? Did you look at him in a suggestive way? Did you have on suggestive clothes? Did you say something? Interrogation of the person who just experienced that rape. The questions weren't designed to catch rapists. The questions were designed to determine whether you deserve what happened to you, and should the culprit actually pay the price for something that they assumed from the beginning that must have been triggered by the woman. And this wasn't the work of like a few people, maybe an officer there or a police station there. No, this was standard procedure. Standard procedure around the world. Accepted practice. The system working exactly as designed. I hope at some point I'll get to tell you a story about a woman in Spain who was raped, and she had to do what she had to do, and just what she do. I'm going to give you that story one of these days. So Dr. Anne Walbert Burgess, she thought that this practice, this system, that doing as it designed to do, was unconscionable. And she decided that. Dr. Burgess was a psychiatric nurse and a researcher in Boston. She began noticing something that disturbed her deeply about rape. She began to notice that rape survivors were being treated for physical injuries. Then they were sent home, often to face disbelief and face blame and face all kind of things from families and friends and neighbors, and they had zero psychological support. She surmised that no one was studying what rape actually did to a person's mental health. No one was documenting the patterns. No one was treating sexual assault as the serious psychological trauma it was. So, in the early 1970s, Dr. Burgess and her colleague Linda Little Armstrong did something simple but very, very radical. They started interviewing rape survivors, not to interrogate them, not to doubt them, not to poke holes in their stories, not to let them feel raped again by antagonizing and interrogate them, not to doubt them, but to understand them. They listened, they documented, they analyzed. In 1974, they published a research that changed everything. They gave the research name Rape Trauma Syndrome. Their work proved what women had always known but society refused to acknowledge. Rape was never ever about sex. Rape was always about power, control, and violence, and it left lasting psychological damage that followed identifiable patterns like nightmares and flashbacks, hypervigilance, disrupted relationships, fundamental changes in how one behaves and how survivors move through the world, afraid or jittery, and the simplest thing trigger them. This wasn't weakness. This was trauma. That's what they documented. Clinical, undeniable documentation that this was trauma in the worst kind of way. Their research dismantled one of the most dangerous myths in criminal justice, in the entire world's criminal justice system, that quote unquote real rape victims behave a certain predictable way. And this is how the men them outline it and record it and put it in document, that them put this real rape victims behave a certain predictable way. They surmise, the men who wrote this, that when women are raped, they behave hysterical. They report it immediately, and they fight back violently. And that is what they surmise that women do, real women that have been really raped. Of course, Dr. Burgess threw that whole myth through the door. She showed that trauma responses varied enormously, and that delayed reporting, emotional numbness, or fragmented memories didn't mean that someone was lying. It meant that they had survived something devastating and they are still traumatized by it all. But convincing the criminal justice system to respect survivors' psychology was just the beginning of Dr. Burgess's long journey. In 1975, she was invited to lecture at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. She spoke about sexual assault, victimology, and psychological trauma. The FBI's behavioral science unit, because the FBI had a behavioral science unit from the beginning, which was mostly designed to calculate criminal minds, not rape, criminal minds and spy networks and stuff like that. So it's a behavioral science unit filled with men that have absolutely no training in how to deal with anything relating to women, least of all rape. And there was a small group trying to understand violent criminals and what was their fascination with violence and killing. They thought that Dr. Burgess's presentation was quite fascinating. And so they invited her to collaborate with them. They invited her to collaborate with them. And this in itself was extraordinary. The FBI was an almost entirely male institution. Women had only been allowed to become FBI agents from about, I think, 72. And even then, barely. The idea that a psychiatric nurse, a woman, could contribute meaningfully to criminal investigations was rather revolutionary. But Dr. Burgess brought something that they desperately needed, something they would never have. Never ever, not the male collaboration of FBI agents or even criminal psychologists. She brought something that they were never had. She understood victims. They not only chose not to understand victims, they chose not to even try. The behavioral science unit of the FBI was interviewing serial rapists and serial killers in trying to understand them. But they were missing half of the picture. Dr. Burgess insisted that they also study the victims, not just as evidence at a crime scene, but as human beings whose experiences could reveal crucial patterns in offender behavior. She taught the FBI victimology, understanding who offenders targeted, why they chose specific victims, and how that selection process revealed their psychology. She explained fantasy and escalation, how offenders mentally rehearsed their violence before acting it out, and how their crimes typically became progressively more violent over time and repetition. She brought psychological rigor and academic methodology to a field that had relied primarily on physical evidence and interrogation techniques directed at the person who is raped not the rapist. Working alongside agents like Robert Ressler and John Douglas, Dr. Burgess helped develop criminal profiling. She was among the first to help develop criminal profiling, the practice of analyzing crime scenes and victim patterns to predict the offender characteristics and what that offender probably will do next. Then she co-authored foundational studies on serial sexual homicide. She helped create interview protocols, how to interview rape victims and to treat them not like it's an interrogation, not to treat them like they are the criminals. She analyzed cases and she trained FBI agents. She was instrumental in building the FBI's modern understanding of serial predators. This current FBI's modern understanding of serial predators. Serial predators like Dwayne Vaz and Dayton Campbell, understanding them, understand what triggers them, understand what gives them this need, this overwhelming need to do what they do. But then, after Dr. Burgess did all of that, something predictable, totally predictable, happened. The male FBI agents became famous. Robert Ressler and John Douglas wrote best-selling books about the whole of that. They became consultants for films and television. Douglas himself is the one who wrote the book Mindhunter. You might have seen that series. I don't remember if it's CBS or ABC, but the series is also on Netflix, Mindhunter. And Mindhunter have become a cultural phenomenon, and it's really, really a very successful series on Netflix. In those books, written by those two FBI agents, Dr. Burgess's name barely appeared in any of it. When the Mindhunter series was created, what they did in the series is that they included a character named Dr. Wendy Carr. If you watch it, you will see her. A brilliant and flinching psychologist who brings victimology expertise to the FBI. Therefore, she was, in effect, Dr. Burgess. Dr. Carr, of course, as a character, was inspired by Dr. Burgess. But most viewers never knew a real woman had done this actual work. So for decades, Dr. Burgess's contributions were footnoted in academic papers, but erased from popular narratives. The story of criminal profiling became a story about brilliant male agents, not the psychiatric nurse who taught them all to see victims as evidence. Why? Because even when women do groundbreaking work, even when women literally help create entire fields of study, the credit gravitates toward the men in the room, and they alone reap the glory. Dr. Burgess didn't stop working. She continued her research for decades. She published over 20 books. She trained generations of nurses, investigators, and researchers. She testified from time to time as an expert witness in major rape cases and other violent crime cases. She consulted on thousands of investigations. She became one of the most respected figures in forensic nursing and victimology within professional circles. Outside those circles, she remained virtually unknown. It wasn't until recent years, partly because Mindhunter sparked so much public curiosity. Mindhunter was, it's quite a good show. The writing is crappy in some of the scenes, but it's quite a good show. And Mindhunter sparked public curiosity, and then journalists began asking who was the real Dr. Wendy Carr. And people started learning about Dr. Ann Walbert Burgess. Now in her 80s, Dr. Burgess has finally begun receiving broader public recognition. Documentaries featuring her story, articles celebrating her contributions. The FBI publicly acknowledges her essential role in developing the profiling methodology. Finally, they acknowledge that she was the one who led that process in creating that profiling methodology. But for decades, the woman who taught the FBI to listen to victims, the woman who proved that survivors' experiences were investigative goldmine, was written out of the very story that she helped create. Today, trauma-informed policing exists because of her work. Rape trauma syndrome is recognized in courtrooms. Victimology is standard in criminal investigations worldwide. Every time a detective considers why an offender chose a particular victim, they are using the methodology developed by Dr. Burgess. Every time a survivor's trauma response is understood rather than questioned, that is her legacy. In the 1970s, she did something radical. She insisted that women telling their stories wasn't emotional noise. It was data. It was evidence. It was the key to understanding and stopping violent predators. She believed women when no one else would, and she proved that believing women made investigations more effective. You start by believing the victim. Dr. Ann Walbert Burgess taught the FBI how to catch serial killers by listening to the people that everyone else was ignoring. And then history tried to erase her from that story. But the truth, like trauma itself, has a way of surfacing eventually, and her name deserves to be remembered when we celebrate International Women's Day. This story was brought to you by the American Memories. Please like the video. If the video have a big thumbs up, and share it, please. Thank you all for listening. See you in the next video. God bless you all. Stay safe, everybody, and please do keep our children safe.